What would you say was your biggest challenge in the production? And how long did it take from beginning to end, from you guys starting out with it and finishing it?
Yeah, so we started the production in March of this year. Things should have been slightly quicker had an infamous event not happened throughout the world. But with that in mind, I think it brought the whole crew together. It made us think differently about how we worked, and that obviously brought us to work with you in Thailand and another DP, Daniel Bury, in Australia, which was, I think, contributed content that would have been harder to capture or more costly to capture otherwise. But yeah, the project started in March, and our main challenges, I think, were on a post-production side. We had this fantastic source imagery, and we were only willing to make it into VR if we could truly stand behind it and say that the content itself was outstanding and is something that people wouldn't have otherwise seen. We were really aware as a team of this just not being a picture-in-picture experience. We wanted people to feel like this was through and through immersive content, which we believe it is ultimately. So the main challenges with that post-production were intelligently set extending our rectilinear footage in a vertical and horizontal method without adapting any of the 3D or the stereoscopic alignments. So it was a pretty crazy comp for us as creators. The main challenge was trying to mold the story that was originally a 1 hour piece of content into 5 episodes. And we took that decision in hand with Facebook just to provide people bite-size episodes that they could view in and out of VR, rather than asking someone to commit to a really long, 40-minute VR experience.
So one of the challenges I'm sure that you did have to deal with, and you kind of opened up my eyes to how to work with this, is with the K1 Pro and the K2 Pro with the MKX 200 lenses. You've got such a wide field, and you've got the lenses in the shot. How did you deal with that? You came up with a very unique way of dealing with that using Mystica VR. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So obviously our post-production pipeline took us from the Z-cams into a series of workflows prior to the convergence or stitching. It's not quite stitching, but the convergence process. We ran the cameras through a denoiser and a sharpener before going into any type of de-warping or convergence process. And that's primarily just to ensure that we can accurately denoise the cameras based on a noise profile that was generated for each sensor, without the computer being confused of the warping of noise pixels. So once we'd completed that, we ran the cameras into Mystica VR and spent a long time creating custom profiles for each scene. And that's mainly to do with, 3D depth, lighting conditions. We worked with SGO and the guys who create Mystica to create accurate log curves to make sure that when we removed or had finished processing the footage, we could grade it as accurately as possible. But removing the cameras from the field of view was done based on a parameter which is offered through Mystica that allows you to effectively scale the convergence. So we accurately positioned each of the sensors within the de-warp field, if you like, which means that the center of each VR's user's eye is the center of each lens to make sure that the 3D effect is as comfortable as possible. And then once we'd achieved that, it was a question of just scaling on positioning the pan axis of the viewer in Mystica, and then scaling each camera up ever so slightly on the exterior. So that effectively it stretches the edge of the image ever so slightly, but we often find with the Izuger lenses that they fall slightly soft at the edge of the frame anyway. So we were happy making the trade-off there of a slightly softer edge to achieve an edge-to-edge frame that didn't have a lens visible.
Plus, with the Izuger lenses, you get basically almost chromatic aberration free to the edge, which is really nice.
Yeah, I mean,
So
the new MX 200 lenses are really outstanding optics. They do have considerable challenges, especially when filming out in such rural environments, and that's mainly to do with their sensitivity to being bumped or defocused in any way. And certainly in Australia with the K2 Pro, we had one or two challenges where we had to work at silly hours in the middle of the night here in the UK to support refocusing those cameras. Which wasn't ideal to make it to put it honest. To focus those cameras, you need almost like a lab environment, and trying to do that out in the open is near impossible. But we did it in the end, and the shots are as good as they could be. Could they be even better and nicer? Of course, but we weren't working with a unlimited budget for this project, and we had to make the most of the technology that we had. I think if I was to redo it and go back again, I'd probably look at creating a custom rig using two cinema cameras. For these kind of wider GV shots, we don't need a really small convergence between the two cameras. So it would have been something that would have provided a really incredible match to the cinema grade quality that we had for our macro photography.